Ann Widdecombe served as MP for Maidstone and Weald from 1987 to 2010 for the Conservative Party. She's been a government minister twice, and most recently she was elected as a Brexit Party MEP in 2019 in an effort to secure Britain's withdrawal from the EU. And I'm pleased to say that she joins me now from Kent. Ann, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Now, I want to start, it's for the early part of your life. What was it that got you interested in politics in the first instance?
I think there were two things. The first was, and if I say this to young people today, they look at me as if I'm talking Greek or something. But I think the first thing was that when I was growing up, the world was split into two contesting political ideologies, communism and capitalism. And of course, the manifestation of that was the Cold War, the Berlin Wall. And you were on one side or the other. And in those days, you never knocked on a door to canvass and were told, oh, well, you're all the same, aren't you? Because people knew that we weren't all the same, that world contest was reflected in this country and in other Western democracies in a contest between capitalism and socialism. But it was socialism. It wasn't Blair's New Labour. It was red in tooth and claw socialism. And as I say, everybody knew which side they were on. And I certainly didn't want socialism. So that was one reason. The second reason was just simply to try and solve insoluble problems. And when I say that, you'll immediately think, oh, I'm thinking of Northern Ireland or the health service or the pension system. But in fact, you also have those problems at very individual level. And one of the major satisfactions of being an MP is sorting out problems that look as if they have no resolution. And my best moment probably in Parliament came not from any ministerial action, but from when acting solely as a constituency MP, I was a minister at the time, but acting solely as a constituency MP, I got one of my constituents out of jail in Morocco.
Oh, wow. That's a feat indeed, actually. Would you call that was probably one of your main achievements? What other things do you feel really proud about during your time, perhaps within the Conservative Party? Because I know obviously now you've moved to a different party, but within that party.
I lost you a bit there, but I think you were asking me what I'm most proud of actually in the Conservative Party itself.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think probably, well, for example, again, it's not a major policy change, but I changed the way that people spoke at party conferences. And until I came along in 1998, everybody spoke from a lectern, reading from notes, or latterly reading from an auto cue. And I'd been brought up in an evangelical household, and I was used to fire and brimstone preachers. And I said, none of this, do away with the lectern, do away with the notes, walk up and down the platform and talk to people, because that way they can't go to sleep because their eyes are following you.
So you're responsible for this behaviour of these MPs. I'm joking. And so as you're watching what's going on with the Conservative Party and, in fact, even the Labour Party, but mainly the Conservative Party, what are your observations? What do you think when you see all of this?
Well, it's the result of a very large number of new MPs coming into Parliament, not having the slightest notion what it's about, and not having been able to sort of bond and get close to senior members of the party because of COVID. And also because, going back now to 1997, when Tony Blair changed the hours that Parliament sat, suddenly we were no longer in the tea rooms, the bars, the restaurants late at night when we couldn't work anymore, talking to each other, getting to know each other. There was camaraderie. That's gone. It's now a bit like any other workplace. You know, you come in the morning, you work, and you go home in the evening. It was very, very different in our time. I knew every single cabinet minister. I had spoken to just about everybody in the party in the course of those evenings. And there was a real bonding, as we now call it. In those days, it was just, party spirit. That's gone. That's gone. And actually, it's one of the casualties of the changes of hours. The other is a much more serious one, which is there is now much less scrutiny of legislation.
Yeah, that is the thing, isn't it? And of course, as we're all focused on these little these little things that are going on parties or people complaining that things aren't working in the way they should be. We're not noticing the legislation slowly going through, which is a concern. Now, you're a prominent Brexiteer. How frustrated do you feel about the kind of process that Britain is having at the moment? I mean, we've left the EU, but the Northern Ireland Protocol, this whole situation within it. What's your take on what should be happening, and if you have any ideas of how it could be resolved?
I think we should stop messing about. We should just invoke Article 16, and I think that would bring them very, very quickly to the negotiating table with a completely revised attitude, which is that they want a settlement rather than just want to prolong the current situation. I always thought we should have left without a deal. If we had left without a deal, we would probably have an entirely sensible one now. But by leaving Northern Ireland effectively, not legislatively, but effectively in the EU, by doing that, we have broken up the United Kingdom. And that is not something I want to see.
No, me neither. I mean, I love all parts of the United Kingdom. It's only actually after that deal that you realise that actually each country is completely separate and actually it could fragment in this manner. Now, you switched sides from the Conservative Party to the Brexit Party. Given Christian Wakeford's defection this week, do you have any sympathy with those who are frustrated with the party in its current state?
No, none at all, because it's an instant frustration. I mean, for heaven's sake, it's only 2019 since these people stood, late 2019, December 2019, that these people stood on exactly the ticket that Boris Johnson had put forward. So, no, I don't feel any sympathy. Now, during my time in Parliament, and I was there 23 years, of course I saw people cross the floor in both directions. And the one thing that marked them out was we all knew it was going to happen. We all knew they were unhappy. We watched them over a long period of time trying to come to terms with the things that they didn't agree with in their own party. And then finally they would go. They didn't do it in the first 5 minutes. And they didn't do it precipitately. So no, I've no sympathy at all with Christian Wakeford. Yes, I did leave the Conservative Party, but it was after 55 years, not 2 or 3.
Of course. And given all the things that are going on and have been going on in Downing Street and the Partygate and all this situation, do you think that Boris should go?
No, I do not think that Boris should go. Just think what will happen. First of all, you've got no guarantee that you'll get a Brexiteer in his place, none at all. And if you get a Remainer in his place, then our negotiations over Northern Ireland are going to have some very, very odd outcomes indeed. And we're not going to be able to stand up for ourselves in this world of global trade, which we're now entering upon. So that's the first consideration. Brexit is the first consideration. The second and much more important consideration is this. Look, we've got Brexit problems. We've got the end of the pandemic and the need to rejuvenate the economy. We've got the Ukraine. It's a real situation building up there on the international scene. We've got a huge rise in the cost of living coming at us over the horizon. Now, is this really the moment that we want to say that for several months, because that's what it takes to mount a leadership election, that for several months, civil servants, EU negotiators, NATO, and anybody else isn't going to know who the Prime Minister is going to be? Is that really the sort of instability we want now at this moment? Frankly, I think it irresponsible to even think of moving Boris now. I'm frustrated with him too. Yes, of course I am. But I've also got a rather larger picture in my head and some sense of responsibility. These new MPs don't appear to, some of these new MPs don't appear to have that.
Yeah, I mean, and it does see, because it's the new 2019 intake who are mainly in there trying to submit their letters, apparently, and we don't know yet. But what about, if we think about that new intake, though, they've complained about the behaviour of the whips. You mentioned earlier that perhaps it's because they don't really understand how things are run. Do you think the behaviour of the whips needs to actually change?
Look, in every great schism in the party that there has been, that I can remember, there have always been complaints about the whips. Oh dear, the whips are exerting too much pressure. Oh dear, the whips are blackmailing people, etc., etc. I have never known an internal party upset without complaints about the whips. It's as old as the hills. And frankly, these people just want to get some backbone and tell the whips where to go.
And this latest story, of course, with what's been going on in the Conservative Party and the accusations of Islamophobia and all of that, do you have any views or thoughts on that?
I doubt very much if there's any serious Islamophobia, certainly in Downing Street and certainly among those who would be in charge of appointments. I think it's extremely unlikely. Indeed, the other side of the coin is the one we know best, which is where the Conservative Party is quite actively trying to encourage ethnic minorities into Parliament, onto their candidates' lists. That's been going on now for a very long time. So I really don't think that sounds to me just like a bit of a whinge. It doesn't sound to me like a well-founded complaint.
Thank you for your thoughts on that. And I was wondering, of course, now, what are you mostly focused on at the moment and what's happening with you right now?
Well, I write a column for the Daily Express every Wednesday. Excellent column, every Wednesday, page 13 usually. So I write my column for the Express. I do quite a lot of television, like this sort of thing. And I'm writing. And so, but I'm also retired. I do point this out to people when they ask me for a catalogue of what I'm doing. I say, well, do you know, I am retired. I came out of retirement after 9 years to join the Brexit Party and go to the European Parliament, do things I never, ever thought I'd do. I did that because the cause called me. But at the moment, I'm back in retirement. At least I like to think so.
Well, I can't let you go, Anne, though, without talking about Strictly. Let's take a look. That must have been fun. How was that for you?
That was huge fun, and the whole thing was fun. It was a great introduction to retirement because I turned down Strictly. They'd come to me every single year, and I turned them down year after year after year and said, no, can't do it. But as soon as I was no longer an MP, I didn't owe anybody any duty of time or dignity. I thought, yeah, why not? Do it now. And of course, it was such a release from responsibility because while I was in Parliament, every single thing I did had the ability to affect people for good or ill. On Strictly, the only thing I could affect for ill were Anton shins, and I did.
Well, you were absolutely fabulous on it. I watched it and I thought you were brilliant. So it's really lovely to actually talk to you in person. Ann Widdecombe, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Lovely to talk to you. That's Ann Widdecombe. She's a former Conservative minister. This is Outside. You're watching GB News.